This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today is Thales Teixeira. He's an associate professor of business administration at Harvard Business School. His work has been widely published across all the big names that you know and love. Today we're discussing his work, Unlocking the Customer Value Chain, how decoupling drives consumer disruption. This is something I did not think initially on first glance that it would really hit me, but it did. If you're an entrepreneur, Thales' message is so damn important, especially for right now. I just don't know what other business book you would want to start with than the perspective that he's giving. Now, by no means does that mean it's the only way to think, but what he's talking about at the very early stages is so damn important. It's just mission critical. Now, I must say, this is one of those podcast episodes that you, the listener, will not notice how bad the technical recording of this went. Unfortunately, Skype did not cooperate. Unfortunately, my recording at the very initial few minutes did not cooperate. But through the magic of editing, my podcast guy, Matthew, everything will be smooth as silk. But to set this up, part of the very beginning that was missed, I said to Thales, imagine you're in the elevator, giving the elevator pitch. You're with an elevator full of Silicon Valley executives, startup entrepreneurs, just people that like to read business books. And I said to him, quoting him, because he would tell them kind of what his work is about and how he thinks a startup really unfolds. What's the real secret sauce, so to speak? He doesn't use that term. That's me. And to quote him, startups don't cause disruption. Customers do, end quote. And I said to him, most of those people in the elevator would just be like, what is this guy talking about? He has no clue. It's all about technology. It's all about making the product or the service a million times better. This guy, Thales at Harvard, just doesn't get it. And I said to Thales, would that be a fair perspective as to how most people would act towards this new information that you're presenting, this new research? And he agreed with me. Now, jumping off that agreement, that initial story that did not make this particular episode because of a technical glitch, let's jump right into the middle of my conversation with Thales Teixeira.
And to look at the fast speeding spaceship when it's already kind of launched. And that is what I've identified. And when, obviously, if you want to build your own ship, you want to really emulate what these juggernauts are doing. And that is part of the problem. If you're starting a business, it does not make sense to emulate companies that are already on a fast ascent. You need to figure out how did they launch in the first place. And most of the articles today talk about startups as being successful because of their technologies. And so I went back and I looked at the early days of the technologies of these businesses. And when you think about Uber, Uber had no new or innovative technology. Just so we can recall and remember how Uber got launched, if you wanted to get an Uber car, first it was a black car, so it was a high-end car, you would have to call or send a text message to an Uber dispatcher who would frantically try to find a black car in San Francisco or New York City that was available. So they would call all the car companies and say, can you go pick up Professor Teixeira at this place and time? And then I, as a consumer, would receive back a message saying there's a car on their way. By the way, you can look at the app. And then probably the only innovation, I wouldn't call it big innovation, is that you would, for the first time, see in a little map a car coming to your direction. But it was not automatic. It was not on demand. It was not the service that we know of today.
Fake it till you make it.
In part, Airbnb did that very well. So first of all, Airbnb was not the first, the second, the third, the fourth, or the 10th website that allowed people to rent other people's homes. It's not a business model because many others had the same business model. And it's not the technologies. Airbnb just had a website that basically it wouldn't even show the inventory of available homes. The reason why is in the beginning, you don't have any. So in New York City, maybe you have 1, 2, 3, or 5 apartments. And if I ever go as a consumer on a website that has 3 apartments in New York City, I'll never go back again. And the same thing happened in all the other cities. So what they did is basically when you say you need a place to stay in San Francisco, you would put up all the information, the dates, the times you need. And then again, on the other side, it was not automatic. It were a bunch of people that would start calling up other people or looking on Craigslist to see who had a home to rent or a room to rent for that specific time in that neighborhood, and then call you back saying, we got a room, let's book it, so on and so forth. It was not automatic. There was no new technologies. It was much more a hustling, hands down on the ground operation business to try to launch these businesses. So it could not have possibly been technology as a driver of disruption or a startup or business model as the main driver of disruption.
It's really fascinating. Here you are at your perch. You get to see all kinds of insights, all kinds of individuals at Harvard. And then what you're really telling us right now, and you just used the word that I want to use, which is hustle. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there has to be a customer. Somebody has to open their wallet and give some money. Until somebody opens their wallet and gives some money, there's nothing there. So isn't the most important thing to get the customer to open the wallet and get the money?
Absolutely it is. But as you get your first customer in a startup, or your 5th, or your 10th, or your even 100th, the main question you should be asking yourself is, why the hell would this person pay me to do that service? Because you don't have a reputation in the beginning. You don't have a brand. You don't have many people. You don't have the money to hire these employees. You don't have the infrastructure. You have a very, very bad website compared to all the other companies that exist and have millions of dollars to spend on development. So why did that person ended up buying your product or paying for your service? Essentially, what I advocate and advise the startup entrepreneurs is you should consider all of your first customers as a fluke, a puzzle that you need to realize. There's no rational reason why they would have bought your product, yet they managed to buy it. They did so. The reason you don't know. You think you might know. Ask yourself the question, why? And every second, third, fourth, and fifth, and 10th customer, you keep asking yourself the question, why, and try to figure out the puzzle. Why, even with having so many options, right? Airbnb, there were so many other hotels. Uber, there were taxis, they were bad, but there were taxis, there were black car companies that you could on yourself go and book. Why did that customer acquire your service?
Well, what you're really speaking to is the customer. There's something going on in the customer. So when the odd new business offers something, it's the customer who knows I need that something. Even if it's an immature new idea without all the bells and whistles, the customer knows that they're not getting what they really want, and they see that new offering. That's driving it a tremendous amount, isn't it?
The customer in that little decision, in the beginning, that customer did not know what Airbnb and Uber was because they'd never seen an ad of them before. Maybe somebody told it about them, but hey, there's so many other businesses that people tell me about it. That doesn't mean I'm going to start sending my money to them and saying, hey, I don't know what you do exactly, but just I want to do business with you. So somehow you arrive at an airport at night and you have taxis or other options of transportation and you decide to go for this Uber thing. Somehow you could stay with your family for vacation, all the available hotels, many of which are very well, and you decided to rent somebody else's home on this website that just came across you called Airbnb, right? These little decisions, that people, these inconsequential decisions that people make, multiplied by the millions of people that started making this decision approximately at the same time, this is what disrupts businesses.
Here's an example I'm thinking of, really comes to mind for me. One of the very first times I was in Bangkok, Thailand. We landed at like, I don't know, midnight or 2 a.m. or something. Don't speak the language, don't really know the customs, don't know how the taxi system works. But I have enough experience to come out of that airport, and I realized that the taxi system was a little loosey-goosey. And I realized a lot of guys were kind of hanging around waiting. And I realized when I got in the car that I was probably going to go for a ride. And we did go for a ride. In fact, we drove around the Bangkok airport for probably an hour to get to the hotel, which was attached to the Bangkok airport. And the guy played a whole game of not knowing what he was doing and this whole kind of thing. But you know, the second time I would have gone, and this is hypothetical, the second time I would have gone, if I would have had other options, I would have said to myself, you know, this taxi option, this, I already know. This has already happened to me bad. So if there's something else, why not take the gamble on the something else? It's literally those little decisions that cause the customer at that moment in time. I've had this prior experience. I'm now in this place again. Why not just roll the dice on something else? Because I already know what the bird in the hand over here is.
Uber was very smart in the beginning to convince you to roll the dice, as you say, do this gamble. Because Uber didn't launch in the beginning and try to acquire one customer at a time. You have to go back and look at their customer acquisition strategy. And they were pretty smart and clever. They realized that people were willing to make this gamble at certain times and places. For example, so I'm from Boston. You arrive, it's February night. It has just snowed, and you arrive at Boston's Logan Airport at 10:30, 11 p.m. on a flight. The line of taxi is huge. You have to wait. You're not sure if it's going to arrive. You're cold. You're willing to take that gamble. By the way, so many other people probably. There is a sports event or a show, musical performance, and hundreds of people come out at the same time. There aren't any taxis for all of these people at the same time, and suddenly somebody tells you about Uber, or they have a little sign says, you know, get a car from us, and you might be willing to take a gamble. So it's snow, it's cold. When the supply in the market is just not available, you're more willing to take the gamble, and that is how Uber acquired customers in bulk in the beginning. It did not acquire one by one. It acquired hundreds and thousands at the same time by giving you the assurance, if nothing else, not price necessarily, and not the convenience that would eventually become Uber's stronghold. But at that time, you could see a little car coming to you. And as you drove off inside the car, you could see the car going to your house. So you knew you weren't being taken for a ride.
Let's keep it at the Uber example for a second. I'm just going to throw it to another city with a personal experience. I can recall many times landing in Las Vegas at night on a Friday night or something, and the line was just outrageous. And you could realize at that moment in time, and now I'm kind of flipping it to the competition of Uber, but you could realize that there was a certain structure of how the taxi system works. It was either a regulation or a union structure or whatnot. But my gosh, there were so many people that had got off all these flights, hundreds and hundreds of people just in this line. And you're just thinking to yourself, wow, somebody could arbitrage this.
Let's take this a step further. And the principle underlying Uber and Airbnb, Etsy, Amazon, eBay is that they figure out a way to early on acquire customers, not by paying to acquire each customer at a time. That would be slow and expensive process. But they used OPNs, other people's networks. Because when you tap into other people's networks, Uber tapped into the network of, there's people in the airport. There's a bunch of people there at the same time needing the same service, or a show, a concert, or a restaurant that has 50 people, or a musical performance. 10,000 people come out at the same time. Airbnb tapped onto Craigslist, where what would be essentially the place that if you want to rent your house or rent somebody else's house, you'd probably go there. So Airbnb went there. eBay and Etsy went into other markets, the actual markets, the physical markets that are out there. In the case of Etsy, it got its employees to go all across the US to the different fairs and crafts markets to really recruit the first sellers on Etsy. And those sellers had their own networks, OPNs, that would bring in customers. And so this created this viral loop of acquiring offline customers that are sellers that would bring in their own customers, and their customers would bring in more sellers. So OPNs is a very important aspect. And we tend to think of OPNs only online. So another network that you can tap into is Amazon, sell your products, or Facebook or Google social networks. But there are a lot of offline networks. A supermarket is a network of people there, a church, a school. So think about where your potential customers are in mass, not individually, and go and show yourself and show the proposition, particularly when there are no competing options that are reasonable in the case that you're talking about of Las Vegas and at night.
If I was to go back in time and think of the dot-com era where so much money was thrown at ideas and there would be a big staff hire, the nice office, the swanky office, all kinds of bells and whistles, and the people could play foosball and all that kind of stuff, and they could eat their snacks and all that junk. But the reality is, and I want you to elaborate on this if there's been a real shift, it's what you're saying right now. It's like the only thing that matters. And I'm kind of quoting you here in the sense that customers, it's your main job, your only job, and all you have to focus on. And that's it at the beginning. Your research shows if you're not doing that, your chances for success are just about what? Not very good, are they?
If you step back a little bit, what is the advice that entrepreneurs have been getting in the past few years? So the books and the press say, well, so first you have to create a product that is not 50% better than the current available product or service, not 100% better, but 10 times, right? The 0 to 1 book by Peter Thiel. You have to create a 10 times better product that is currently available out there. I don't know about you, Michael, but I can't hardly think of a product that is 1,000% better we can come up with than the currently available option. And when I looked back to Facebook, Facebook was not 10 times better than MySpace. Uber was not 10 times better than black car services or taxi cabs. It was better, not 10 times at the time. Airbnb by far was not 10 times better. When you look at business books and the media, they suggest for entrepreneurs to figure out products and services that they can come up with that are not 50% or 100%, but 1,000 times better than the currently available option. But when you look at Facebook, Facebook was not 10 times better than MySpace. Amazon was not 10 times better than the other options to buy books. Uber was not 10 times better. Airbnb was not 10 times better. Many of them have become probably 10 times better, but at the time of launch, they were not. So then this idea of coming up with products and services that are 1,000% better than available option, that is very hard to accomplish. Not only that, but other things that are touted onto entrepreneurs to be successful. Create an end-to-end user experience, right? Make sure you're not improving just a part of the experience for the customer, but end-to-end, from beginning to end. Use technologies, build your proprietary technology, something that is better and that it's yours and it's unique. Create network effects, right? That whole thing, the flywheel effect of you create a factor that self-propagates itself. So you have to do so many things as a startup entrepreneur that it's almost impossible to even wrap your head around all these issues. It's too much demand.
As you're elaborating, one thing that just strikes me, why do we believe that technology is it? I mean, you're outlining all these things that we think is it, but at the big picture, we all really imagine that technology is the main disruptor. That's the one that's driving it all.
And I've thought about that so many times. When I visit large companies, and many of them are my consulting clients, and I ask them, what is disrupting you? The executives in these large companies tend to first either say, oh, it's technology, XYZ, that is disrupting us, or it's tech company ABC, Amazon, Airbnb, Uber, Google, Facebook are disrupting us. So they have this notion, and it probably comes from the fact that there are certain technologies that are disruptive. And my colleague, Clay Christensen, has written a book explaining how there are some technologies out there that are truly disruptive. The PC, the mobile phone, and other technologies can be highly disruptive. But the vast majority of disruptive startups out there do not have a new and innovative technology. Just to give one example, Dollar Shave Club is a company that actually disrupted the male grooming business. And what do I mean by disruption, just so we're clear? Disruption is a phenomenon in the marketplace in which a big company loses a significant amount of market share, 10, 20, 30 percentage points in a short period of time, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 years, right? That's when disruption happens. And if you look at Dollar Shave Club, in about 7 years, it went from zero to around 55% of the online market for razor blades, stealing the first place from Gillette, a company of 100 years and almost synonymous with the razor blade industry. And Dollar Shave Club have a website and an idea of transparency and shipping, simple razor blades that were not any better than others directly to your doorstep. Right? So this example starts to show that, wait a minute, if a company, a startup like that, without any new technologies or innovative technologies can do it, then technology might not be the main driver of all this. And so throughout my book, Unlocking the Customer Value Chain, I show case after case after case in about 25 different industries that disruption is either happened or starting to happen in which technology was not at play. So do I say that technology doesn't matter? Absolutely not. I would be foolish to say technology doesn't matter. What I'm saying is technology is generally an enabler of a business model or a startup that has found a value proposition that customers are willing to ascribe to. And then technology is basically just this way to speed things up. Technology is an accelerator and enabler of something that already works. But if it doesn't work, if you do not find a value proposition that the customer is willing to pay for, technology is not going to solve your problem.
Here's an interesting wrinkle here, and I would love for you to elaborate. When I hear about the Dollar Shave Club, and I've heard about it for a long time, I say to myself, I'm not lifting a finger. I don't care. I can afford the Gillette razors that I buy. I've been using them forever. Buying them is really simple when I'm at the grocery store or whatever. It just doesn't cross my mind. So what's really interesting about something like the Dollar Shave Club is that clearly they knew that people like me existed. Like, I don't care about Dollar Shave Club at all. But they knew that there was enough of the market that if they jumped in, or they learned early on that there was going to be enough of the market that if they jumped in, that it didn't make a difference if guys like me, Mike, were going to keep buying their Gillette razors.
Let me ask a question, Mike. How old are you?
50.
50. So I am 40, and I have only recently, just as an experimental idea, I've started looking into Dollar Shave Club as a customer, but I knew about it in my research. I had the same question as you, and I posed this question to my students. How come Dollar Shave Club came to dominate this industry? It does not have better marketing than Gillette. Gillette is a part of Procter & Gamble. They spend billions of dollars. They have the best advertisers, ad agencies, media companies that money can buy. It is not because of people. Gillette has the better inventory, operational processes, logistics. I could not figure out why Dollar Shave Club succeeded. And I posed this question to my class at the Harvard Business School. And one of my students said, Professor, this is the reason. And by the way, the first to adopt were millennials. And he basically said, I've observed my dad being gouged for decades, buying the razor very cheaply for a few dollars, and then paying $10, $20 to buy these blades. And by the way, these blades are so expensive that often they're behind glass doors in a lock if you go to CVS, because people want to steal them so much, so valuable. And he said, it could not possibly be that these blades are so expensive. Today with $20, you can buy a DVD player, but you're going to buy just 10 blades, replacement blades. And what he said is, I've been using Gillette blades because my dad used them, but I know they're expensive. And this company is gouging me. This company is benefiting from the fact that I have no other options. And he said, when Dollar Shave Club came and said, look, there is no stick up with a customer. We're not going to stick you up. We will charge you $1 for a blade, $3 for 3 blades, and we're going to ship it to your house. You can start and you can finish whenever you want. We're not going to subsidize the razor such that we're going to make a tremendous amount of money you after with the blades. And the value proposition and the contract with the customer was plain and simple, and my students went for it. And when I asked around, who else went for Dollar Shave Club, the vast majority of my male students raised their hand. So kind of this idea that people felt that they were being taken advantage of is a big issue. And so when Dollar Shave Club just came with a simple proposition, no strings attached, this really spoke to my students for whom $20-$30 every 2 months is a big deal. But probably, yes, I agree with you in terms of money, not for you and me enough that we're going to kind of go out of our way to change our provider of blades.
And that's really interesting, because it's not that the millennial audience really wanted less quality. They just looked at the price and they said, hold on, we don't have as much money as some of these older guys have in their pockets yet. So we're still conscious about spending what money we have. So again, it's not that they wanted less quality. Now, the other issue there is quality, because I think a guy like me would be seduced into thinking that, my gosh, after all those decades of Gillette's secret laboratory research and 17 blades and all that kind of stuff, and it's been built with so much experience, that I've got to get a better shave with that particular product.
We're probably afraid to make the change and then feel like fools because we've been spending so much more money. And, my student is right. We've been taken for a ride to some extent. First of all, if you look at the statements before Gillette was a part of P&G and you look at the profitability of this business is hugely profitable, 60% operating margins, right? And so much money. And this business makes razors and blades and shaving cream, and it's a very profitable global business. And the way it maintains the profitability, part of the way, is by coming up with a series of patents to constantly, quote unquote, innovate and create new products to launch on top of old products and discontinue old products and kind of make the claim that they're getting better and better. But by now, a blade is a blade. We're not going to get much innovation around that. Now, this company uses patents as a way to block potential entrants in the market. And when I looked at the number of patents that Gillette produces per year, Gillette, a company that only makes razors, blades, and shaving cream, creates and files for more patents in the US than Airbus helicopters that builds helicopters, then Pfizer, a pharma company, then Nissan, a car company, then the whole faculty at NYU, and many other companies.
As you describe this, I'm thinking to myself, the foundation, I'm not trying to speak entirely bad here, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it seems like the foundation of Gillette is not unlike what I might witness as you describe this patent structure, the foundation that I might witness in Scorsese's Goodfellas. It seems to be a protection racket.
Absolutely. And it's, quote unquote, what others talk about building moats around your business. Let's build a moat, and the moat can be built through many ways. And in the case of Gillette, Gillette uses many patents to build this moat. And the problem with moats, Mike, is not that they don't work. The problem is that they work. They work too well. They work too well, and they work against the consumer's best interest over time. The consumers know that they're being gouged, know that they're being taken for a ride, but they don't have any option. Until one day, somebody who had no experience whatsoever in making razor blades, one guy, a young guy, decides to dismantle the system and sources products from a Korean factory and decides to sell a direct consumer brand of razor blades in a very simple, cheap, transparent system. And in a matter of 2 to 3 years, gets 55% of the market for online razors. So that's a remarkable story of a big company that was going against their own customers' needs and wants and start up with no technology, no major resources to kind of just a David versus Goliath battle. And we know what happened.
As we're building to some of the key insights to really let people understand your research, there's one point that I want to make about Gillette, and I would love for you to comment on it, and the moats part and Gillette And my gosh, that just brings up the most successful investor in the history of the United States of America out of Omaha, Warren Buffett, who will just tell everybody, my gosh, this is what I want, is the moat business, in particular, Gillette, Coke, etc. And that's what he wants, is the moat business. So the very people that ultimately us are getting gouged by the moat are the very people that want to be invested with the investor who's investing in the moats. It's an interesting circle of life, isn't it?
As I said, moats work. Moats work to build companies that are not that innovative to become highly profitable over time. But it's part of the American democracy and capitalism to break down these moats and not allow them to happen. If somebody can just come up with a competing product that is better at a cheaper price, let them show the way to customers. And what the American system, the antitrust system, should not allow is for Gillette to keep buying all of these little razor blade companies that tried to challenge them over the past few decades or so, because by now there's no big innovation in something as simple as a razor and a blade.
So you know what we've been talking about here, laying all these examples out, the customer value chain, how that unfolds. I want you to define it for the audience, but what's really unfolding here in this disruption is something you call decoupling. So why don't you outline for the audience the customer value chain, and let's bring in the terminology of decoupling.
So what is the customer value chain? Let's take an example of the beauty industry. Sephora is the biggest retailer, what we call the incumbent of the beauty retail industry. If you're a Sephora customer, basically you have a need for a certain beauty product, a skincare, for example, and you have to go to a Sephora store. And you shop around and you look at options and categories of products, and you ask for a sales associate to help you with sampling beauty products. And then it's very important to sample, because what might be good in your skin might not be good in mine. So we need to sample. After you sample, you realize which ones you like. Then you choose that option. You pay for it. You take it home. You use it. If you really like it, you need to replenish. You go back to the Sephora store, replenish it, and so on and so forth. That for you is the customer value chain. It's all the activities involved in acquiring products and services. So going to the store, sampling, choosing an option, paying for it, taking it home, using it, disposing of it, replenishing it, all of these activities. And we could map out the customer value chain for any company dealing with any customer whatsoever. Let it be the government, a business, a consumer. There is a series of activities involved in the process acquiring goods and services. Why do I call it the customer's value chain? Why do I use the term value? Because in a customer value chain, you can map out all of these steps in the process as belonging into one of three categories. Is it a value creating activity? Is it a value capturing activity? Or is it a value eroding activity? So going back to the Sephora case, sampling beauty products is a value creating activity for me because it helped me understand what is good for me. Using the product afterwards is also a value creating activity. Paying for the product or paying shipping if I buy online is a value capturing activity because it's the way for the company Sephora to make money. And there's a series of value eroding activities, which are activities that don't create value for me or for the company. And if I could do away with them, I would probably do it. So just the act of visiting a store is a value eroding activity. The act of disposing products is a value eroding activity. These things are just necessary evil. If I could do away with them, I wouldn't be losing anything, but I just have to do it as part of the process. So all customer value chains can be classified into one of these three steps. Now, what is decoupling? Decoupling is basically when a startup looks at this customer value chain that is being offered by an incumbent like Sephora and says, wait a minute, going to the store to sample beauty products every month is a hassle for me. I am a working mother. I don't have the time. I don't have the patience. So how do I avoid having to go to the store to sample beauty product? A few years ago, a startup called Birchbox from students at Harvard, and then another one called Ipsy from students at Stanford, realized that they could ship you samples of beauty products at your home. You pay $10 a month and you get 4 or 5 samples of beauty products, and then you can test it on your skin, on your hair, and figure out which ones you want to buy. Afterwards, you could actually even go to Sephora or Amazon or even to their online stores and make the purchase.
Can I share with you, just to break the ice on something? I've had the good fortune in this podcast to talk to a lot of, I think I'm 6 or 7 Nobel Prize winners in econ. And I have to tell you, like one of the last ones, oh my gosh, the entire conversation was pixelization. We literally had to do surgery on the episode. So like, look, I know you've really achieved some great status in your position, but I got to tell you, when you've got a Nobel Prize winner on and it starts to go to shit, you're like, oh man, no, help me.
I imagine. Decoupling is the process of breaking apart the customer value chain and choosing to offer only one of these activities to the customer. In the case of the beauty industry, Birchbox and Ipsy decoupled the value chain from Sephora by offering to consumers only the sampling part, right? You could sample the beauty products by ordering these subscription boxes, and then you figure out which ones you like it. You can go back to Sephora. There are companies that help you understand what beauty products are good or bad in terms of which ones might have cancer-related research that shows that the ingredients are bad, they're not natural, they're made of petroleum. It's called the Good Face Project. They're essentially just doing the TripAdvisor of beauty products. They don't sell you beauty products, they don't sample. You can go all across different customer value chains and figure out what activity customers are not really satisfied, and then you can try to steal that activity for yourself. When Amazon went from selling books to selling electronics, it knew that people needed to test these electronics, but at the time it didn't have stores. So it came up with apps that allowed you to practice showrooming. You go to Best Buy, the incumbent in the electronics retail sector, and then you look at all the TVs, you ask for the advice of the salesperson, and then when you know which one you want to buy, you pick out your phone, and Amazon would allow you to take a picture, scan a barcode, and then buy that TV or that electronic right in the store, what we now know as showrooming. But that was an example of decoupling. So there's many, many examples of startups figuring out what part of the customer value chain customers are not fully happy and trying to steal that activity. Instead of stealing the customer, Birchbox, Good Face Project, Amazon stole only one activity in the customer value chain.
What I love about the way you phrase this, and I want to quote you here, and this is something from your work, find the activity where consumers are not fully satisfied. That is the weak link in the customer value chain, which you've been saying, and that is your beachhead. I love how you say that, and that's your beachhead. That's the place that you land.
This goes back to our original idea, Mike, of how can a startup begin to acquire their first, second, third, fourth, 10th customer if they don't have all the resources of the big companies? How can you compete with a big company? How can you disrupt Gillette? How can you disrupt Walmart? How can you disrupt the taxi industry without any resources? The way you do it is not by saying, I'm going to replicate what you do and I'm going to do it 10 times better. The way you do it is by you find one little thing that the big established company doesn't do well, and you say, I'm going to steal that one micro sliver of the customer value chain, and I'm going to do it so much better. And by the way, Birchbox did sampling so much better than Sephora, even in the onset. And that's how it started gaining traction.
You know what's amazing about this piece of work that you've put together, your research, is that I really think that for those people that are awake and have been down the path, it's a very big picture way to think about, but it's also to the ground simple in the sense that it makes sense. And it really reorders my mind to kind of go back to perhaps some of my original experiences that I just learned as an entrepreneur and say, well, hold on, those things that I was learning, those baby steps that I was learning from customer feedback, from first customers, that was really important. And then sometimes, you over the years and the decades, you get distracted. And you mentioned so many of the other business books. You get distracted with all these other ideals. But the reality is when you're starting out, it's just the customer, baby. And it's about learning from the customer. We haven't really talked about that. But once you get that customer and the second customer and the 10th and the 100th, it's about learning along that path.
Learning is actually the priority above and beyond actually acquiring customers. That's what trips most startup entrepreneurs that they talk to. They start going on this race to acquire as many customers as cheaply as possible. And in the process of doing so, they miss the fact that in the beginning, your goal is not to go fast, not to scale a business. You should not try to scale a business in the beginning. You should try to learn as much as possible from each new customer you acquire, because the learning that you acquire from asking the simple question, why the hell did you buy this product from me, first customer? Where there's so many options. I'm new. You don't know me. I don't have experience. I don't have anything. Why did you choose me over all the other? So you can apply that little golden nugget to customer two. You can use that information to build a better service. You can use that information to service your customer better after purchase. You can use that information to acquire customers cheaper or better. There's so many uses for that knowledge. So in the first phase of a startup, entrepreneurs' primary goal is to learn about how to acquire and service customers. And this process of learning will go again and again as you get more customers. And over time, you're going to start learning less and less, marginally less and less, because you're going to learn things you already know. That is the point that you should start switching from a learning, primarily mindset, to a using that knowledge, basically scaling the process of acquiring customers. But realize that in the beginning, companies live or die by how many customers they have. That is the priority. Priority is not building the technology. Priority is not creating moats. Those are important elements later on in the life cycle of companies. In the beginning, you will live or die by, do you have enough paying customers to offset the fixed cost of your business?
I have one last big picture question. As we talk about this, you've done the research, you've looked at the commonalities. Obviously, these companies that we're talking about, these examples, they weren't sharing notes. I mean, they were doing their own thing in completely different industries. And obviously, there's been some common behavior in how they've approached their situation. Were these companies that you have studied and the research that you've done, were they stumbling into this process? Is something they had to do because they just had to do it, or they weren't going to survive? There was not going to be a company? Or was this very planned on their part?
Is it a deliberate strategy, or did the strategy emerge through the process of working? Most of the startups told me that startup entrepreneurs, founders told me that there's so many competing priorities that they learn as they go. We have to be clear, and I think that's a good point to say that in the past, when these companies were trying to do what they did, this was not a deliberate strategy for the most part. Over time, as we learn collectively as a society, in the startup culture, in the innovation culture, and academics as well, we start realizing that there are patterns. And these patterns we give to our students. So the next wave of startup entrepreneurs, the ones that are in the market right now, they're operating with more deliberate strategies and a combination of kind of intuition. But as we go forward, the market is getting smarter.
It's really fascinating. I think you do a great job of allowing people, all potential entrepreneurs, to imagine, oh, wow, there's still a chance for me. I can still get into the game as long as I kind of have this particular perspective on how to approach it. It really does open up the entrepreneurial landscape for everyone. Is that a fair statement? Or do you think, as you say, the market is learning and it's closing doors? Or do you think it really does give this opportunity for everybody to continue to look at the assorted customer value chains and say, where can I disrupt? Where can I decouple?
That's part of the reason I wrote the book, Mike. Entrepreneurs, first of all, there's a survey by IBM that showed that entrepreneurs spend 90 to 97% of their time focused on their own industry. And part of my book, what I found that was so profound is that there is a pattern to digital disruption. And this pattern shows itself in multiple different industries. And so when you read the book, Unlocking the Customer Value Chain, you go through various different industries, about 25 or so, and you see the commonalities. And it's enough for readers to say, okay, I generally spend my time only in my industry, and I thought that what was going on was only in healthcare, or only in the transportation industry, or only in the razor blade industry, or only in the hospitality industry. But this is happening across the board, across industries, across sectors, across countries. And my job as an academic was just to not be enamored with any specific industry and look across the gamut and show the pattern, show how the pattern works, to the point that there is even a prescriptive advice to say there is even a recipe for disruption. The recipe doesn't guarantee success, just like a recipe for cake doesn't guarantee that the cake will taste well, but there is a logical sequence of steps and ingredients that you should use that if you follow this, the chances of failure are going to be smaller. But now everybody's game is higher. People are starting to realize and know this. So you as a new entrepreneur coming into the market today, you can't afford to make the mistakes that Travis from Uber or any other entrepreneurs made 10 years ago. Everybody's catching up to the knowledge and these rules. It's not just for me to kind of unlock them and show them, but many others are finding the other rules. So now it's the time to use what has high return over investment. And so reading to avoid the common pitfalls is almost a necessary aspect to keep playing this game.
What I love about your work is that for those in the audience that are listening that are entrepreneurs, business owners, have started a company, whatnot, it will just resonate. I think for people that are new, of course, they've got your book. They can look at that and they can say, well, this sounds great, but then there's all these other titles, right? There's all these other business titles out there. But I would remind the audience, if you have not been down the entrepreneurial path and you want to go down that path, find other like-minded entrepreneurs and let them give some feedback. Because I have to say, this really resonated with me. I was like, it's something I was learning and I somewhat push it aside. And so I really appreciate that. I just appreciate that you've gone down that path and learned something that I used to always think, gosh, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe this isn't what I'm really seeing. And you kind of have reduced that to a nice piece of work. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you very much, Mike. This means the world to me to hear the fact that you as an entrepreneur find value in my work and that others might value it as well. Thank you so much for saying that. I'm touched.
The book, Unlocking the Customer Value Chain, How Decoupling Drives Consumer Disruption. It's where to start. It's great stuff. I appreciate it. Hey, where can we send people? Where's the best website you would like to send them to either check you out, find you, email you, stalk you? Where do you want them to go?
There's a few options. I think the main one, my website that has material on the book, on talks, on workshops that you can do is decoupling.co. You can follow me on Twitter, Thales, Thales, HBS. Always, there's my Harvard website that you can just Google and find it, but just Googling my name and there's plenty of resources.
Thales, I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.